Hi guys, welcome to Don't Think Twice.
It's 2018.
The 2018 edition.
The 2018
it's
edition.
changing.
It's a whole new year.
Okay,
whole new
so
lease on life.
This is the deal. We're upping the ante this year.
Yep. Bigger and better. We've made a lot of really lofty promises to ourselves this year.
Which means you will have to suffer while we tell you all about them.
And figure out our way through the jungle. We are jumping into a ton of creative projects, full scale, hitting that freelance life 24/7. Gonna be working for ourselves by the end of this year.
And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
The freelance life.
So I'm sick.
You're sick. What happened?
I have not had one single healthy day of 2018 so far. I've been sick. The last fully healthy day I had was like Christmas. I came back with getting sick from my nieces, as I do every time I see them.
Yeah.
Because children are a cesspool of
But
germs.
then they came back to New York.
And then they came to visit me in New York. I'm not convinced that like they didn't bring me something new as a present to New York. Although it's possible that I could have just gotten this from like being around and
like a subway pole or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm kind of a little miserable and I probably sound a little ridiculous, but
oh, you sound fine-ish.
I feel like I just really quickly, I don't want to talk about being sick. I just feel like every time I feel like this, I'm like, why don't I appreciate it more when I'm healthy? I haven't been able to sing, which has been such a bummer, and then I miss it so much.
Yeah,
and
you gotta be grateful for your health.
Yeah, so like remind me like the first day that I'm feeling better to like be a little bit less of an ungrateful wretch about myself.
Well, I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. Okay, so Andrew is recently full-time freed from the shackles of servitude.
Yeah, I mean, you could also just say unemployed. There is a word for it.
Yeah, full-time unemployed.
I'm full-time unemployed, and I am I'm moving into week 3, solidly into week 3, and I have no complaints.
Yeah, well, so I think the first thing that I asked you was like, because I was tentative about it the first week because I wasn't sure how you were going to be feeling. I was like, okay, are you freaking out? Are you super excited? Both of those things, it's okay.
Yeah.
And you were basically like freaking out 0%.
Zero. I reserve the right to one day freak out.
Oh yeah, and I'll be here for you.
Yeah, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, no, I feel like you've been in fact like more happy and just kind of like energized than I've seen you in a long time.
I mean, I have been even though it's been unbelievably cold for a lot of January, and I don't like the winter time in general. So even with that aside, I've been my mood has been great. I've been busy every day. I'm busy, and we can get into like what I do with my day.
Yeah.
But my report from the field of being unemployed for 3 weeks is a big old thumbs up.
That's awesome. Wait, so okay. So I think that the most natural question after that is like, okay, your days are packed. What does that mean? What does it look like?
Well, I've sort of stuck to a Monday through Friday routine, and then I give Saturday and Sunday as like weekend days. And
you feel like just like having some structure to it, otherwise it would just all bleed together, your work and personal, like kind of creating.
Yeah, so you and I have talked about this jointly, that discipline is something that we can lack.
Yes.
And or we do lack.
Yeah.
And that this year, like, we both want to make a concerted effort to be just more disciplined about the things we know we want to do. We're not all out and out undisciplined people, but everyone can sympathize with like a 2-3 hours like slipping away from you, and you being like, what the hell did I just do? Like, why did I just watch those YouTube videos of Bette Midler for like 3 hours? So I get up between 6:30 and 7 o'clock every day, and that is a good hour to an hour and a half earlier than I used to get up when I worked. Because there's something about having the day to myself, like it's mine to use. I don't have trouble getting up. So I get up.
That's amazing, actually. I think that's actually pretty like a significant thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
You're not a morning person.
Yeah, God knows. But yeah, to be like, going from like dragging yourself out of bed at 9 a.m. When you had to like work, to being now just like not chirpy per se, but like ready to like hit the ground running at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Actually, that's like beyond my conception.
So I'm getting up early, and then I have my breakfast, and then I'm meditating every morning. Now, that has been harder than I thought it was gonna be.
Me too. So that was one of my sort of goals as well. But I actually think it's been helping me out a lot in terms of really mundane things.
Like how so?
Like a subway commute. I had to go all over the place, like in opposite directions to where I was headed and stuff. And so basically, this would be normally the thing that I would start my day out with this and get to work and then just be in the foulest mood, and my whole day would be thrown off. But like I really was able to just be like, really just let it go.
Nice.
I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but like experiencing the annoying thing, but then not like carrying it with you for the whole rest of the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, but to return back, so you're starting out your day.
Yeah.
You meditate.
I get my breakfast. I meditate, and then I sit down and I write for an hour, and I set a timer. I turn my phone off while I turn on airplane mode, and then I. So
it's like a set amount. It's like a set amount of time that you're just sitting down. And
for me, it's a set amount of time. I sit down, and the rules are that I don't rewrite anything that I've written before, and that I don't reread anything I've written. If I want to reread what I did the day before, I do it before I set my timer. And then I set my timer for an hour, and the point is just to keep writing. And sometimes I'm writing stuff that is so terrible. I'm like, I'm never going to use this. But I'm like, I just keep going, and I don't check the timer. I just keep going until it goes off. And I only do 1 hour at a time, and that might not sound like a lot. And on some days I've been very distracted, and it's been hard. So in those days, a couple of days, I've done 15-minute chunks.
One thing that I've adopted from you that I think has been in the like brief time that I've tried to do this is really helpful is this like not going back and editing and to just like write as much, like get as much down of a full first draft before you go back and like, start
tinkering with anything.
Tinkering. Yeah, I think tinkering is like exactly the right word, because it conveys the level of like bullshittery that I get sucked into, where like I've only written 7 pages or whatever, 10 pages of the script that I'm working on, and then every time I sit down I start back from the beginning, and I'm like, I just need to like remind myself of where I'm at, and then I like reread the whole thing, and then I start like wordsmithing and crafting and moving stuff around, and then like before I know it, I've actually spent an hour and I still only have 10 pages.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I'm really trying to adopt that, and it's been
tough.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's hard because I don't know that either of us would really self-identify as being perfectionists.
I would.
But yeah, I mean you are. I don't know if I would self-identify that way, but I struggle a lot with that as well. Like, just allowing, like, I can't even tolerate the idea of like a bad first draft being out there at all.
Yeah.
Like as though that it has to like spring fully formed and like perfect out the first time, which obviously is not going to happen. So I just have to like get over myself and just have a bad first draft and be like chill about that.
Well, that's what.
So that's a huge part of my learning curve.
So enough about me. This is what I've been doing. So
no, but that's super exciting. No, congrats.
It is.
Like,
no, thank you.
Awesome.
I'm, like I said, I haven't freaked out yet, but I do give myself permission to at some point.
Yeah, you're fully allowed. You do not have to have a fully.
But so it's like a big moment of change, right? Because I'm gonna have to at some point either have another job or like be making money in a certain kind of way. So stay tuned.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But anyway, what's other than being sick for the past month, what's January doing to you?
Well, I like I said, I think I'm very much on this energized train of having lots of projects going on, lots of deadlines, feeling super like creatively like charged, like excited about everything that that you and I are working on, and kind of trying to dive into like a million different projects all at once and trying to be a big joiner right now. I've been going to a lot more live performance, not because of any concerted effort in like it's like, oh, this is like New Year resolution or anything like that. But that's been happening a lot, with, as it is when you amp up that side of things. It's hit or miss because there's
anywhere. I mean, I was going to say the city, but anywhere.
In the city in some senses, not specifically to here, but it's such a saturation point with so many venues and so many performances here and so many opportunities that, and so many people trying to do a thing that, there's definitely a big spectrum. But whatever, I never regret going to see something, even if I come away thinking that it wasn't like the greatest. Like I'm pretty much uniformly always glad that I had that experience anyway. Yeah. The other big thing that's happening right now is that I'm both sick, but like also on this like stupid diet thing. Yeah. That I'm doing for 2 weeks, which I've never dieted ever, literally in my entire life. I've never like restricted myself purposely from anything. But again, I think I'm a little bit, and then usually I would have shut this down categorically, but I'm trying to be a little bit more open to it because of this idea that it contributes to this whole like 360 thing about the discipline, right? Yeah, it's a very like stereotypical like New Year's moment that I'm having, which is like I'm gonna like start with a trainer and then like agree to do his like wacko elimination diet for 2 weeks, but we'll try it.
Let's just throw shit at the wall.
Exactly. See what works. See what sticks. And if I'm like insufferably cranky after week 1 of this diet, or like 3 days in, and I'm like being a raging psycho, I'll trust
it's like the time I did the 4-hour body. That's not what it's called. It's Tim Ferriss's diet.
It's like the 4-hour
which is basically
day, a week or whatever work week.
The 4-hour work week guy wrote another book about his body. Or our bodies, or how you can a diet. I don't know, some diet that he took a long time to engineer, and I tried to follow it. And how many days did I make it? Like
probably 3. Yeah,
3.
I mean, you actually started. It was like what I imagine like a robot, like when it like runs out of fuel. Like you were just like.
Yeah, I remember. Well, because you had basically you couldn't eat anything but like cottage cheese and protein. And no carbs at all.
Yeah, it turns out that your body does need some amount of carbohydrates to convert to energy. Otherwise, you just...
At least mine does. Yeah. And I remember because we went to the Queen's Museum with JR to see this exhibit. And it was kind of cold and rainy. We had to walk a long way. And I was trying to follow this diet. And I was so tired. And then afterwards, we went to go get tacos. And I was like, I'm not going to get tacos because I can't eat the taco. I'm going to do something else. And then we got in there, this taco place. And I smelled the tacos. And I was like, I have to do it.
I have to eat the tacos.
Fuck you, Tim Ferriss. Fuck you. And I had 3 tacos. And I...
came back to life.
Top of the world.
Really, again,
I
it
then
was like...
ran home 30 miles.
No, but it was like the other way around. It was like you suddenly like, and then like woke back up. It was remarkable.
Well, so I want to add one thing to your diet suggestion. I mean, all of this sounds fine, but if anyone knows Amrita, they should know that she drinks 1 glass of water every week, like just one. Like she never drinks.
Yeah, that's a generous just like recommendation. Yeah.
So I challenge you to drink like a healthy amount of water every day and see how far that gets you.
Oh my God, it's so exhausting. Like
it is.
It's tiring to do it, and then you have to pee all the time, and like that's a whole thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you work.
I mean, I basically I don't know how I function because isn't there a thing where like the human body can survive without food for like 11 days or something
much
like
longer,
but then you would die immediately without water.
Yeah, it's
basically
like 3 days or something. I don't know.
But the thing is, I basically never drink water.
No. You probably haven't had a glass of water in 2018. Except for this the sparkling seltzer that you stole from Joy and Reed this morning.
I was enraged.
And now it's in the universe.
I know, we just put it out there. No, I'm if it helps, I'm ashamed of myself. I shoplifted a bottle of seltzer in anger.
In anger.
As if you're going to show the man.
Yes.
As if the Dwayne Reed empire is going to crumble.
As
if the manager of Dwayne Reed that was so rude to you is going to get fired or reprimanded because one pomegranate cherry seltzer is missing from the cooler.
And also, I know how you feel about that flavor. I think you referred to it as white trash in the past.
That's a trash flavor.
Anyway, I said that I felt ashamed of myself. I'm not really sure what came over me. And even in the moment, I was like, this is wrong. But then I did it.
It's fine.
I was hangry.
Karma came around, slapped you in the face almost immediately.
Immediately, yes. Where all my very important documents I was carrying around in my tote bag became immediately soaked by the water that I stole and then put into my bag. So, I think we're square.
Yeah, so don't steal. Yeah. But do drink more water this month, and we should check in with you.
So that's like my January.
Well, you're with this trainer for the next couple months, so that'll be interesting to.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna be fucking Amazon, man.
Yeah, I mean.
Or something.
All right, let's take a break.
Okay.
And we're back. All the great things I said about the last 3 weeks being unemployed, it did recently make me think about all of the jobs that I've interviewed for while living in the city, which I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary. Well, later on in the summer. You are like
next
right around
week.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
10 years in New York.
Yeah, we're going to mark it somehow.
Right. But in that time, you and I both have interviewed for
countless jobs.
Countless jobs.
Yeah.
When you graduate into a recession, it seems that
Yes, we had the unique pleasure of not so unique, but the pleasure of coming into the job market in like 2008, 2009, like basically the worst moment.
Right.
So I would say conservatively, I've applied to hundreds of jobs.
Oh, easily.
Like hundreds. This definitely is a topic that like cuts close to home because like I've had so many experiences.
So I just wanted to share a few. I think we should both share like a few.
All right, so you want to go first or should I?
How about you go first? I mean, I think I have
so
a few
many.
stories, but you have some really good ones.
I have so many. Okay, so first of all, let me start with the category of like being ghosted, because I feel like a lot of things in the job hunting world are so much like the dating world. Being ghosted is something that has happened to me so many times.
Yep.
In my job hunting career. I have had multiple times from totally like different places, and I won't go into all of them. Just one of them really quickly was one where and again on this topic of kind of punching beneath your weight class, that I was applying for a database administrator job.
Right. So this was when you wanted to leave your full-time job to do something part-time.
I wanted to leave my full-time job to do something part-time. And so this was at an arts nonprofit, and basically it's a very lowly job of data entry and checking the formatting on things. Yeah. So if you can believe it, there were multiple rounds, and the second round involved coming in to take a written timed test.
Yeah.
So I basically took an exam.
Yeah.
On interview 2.
Mm-hmm. On how to like format like a street address and a telephone number. And then
never heard back.
I mean,
it like does not get like more like spit in your face than that, except for the time when I applied for a job that I had already worked.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
I'd worked in this role, and then and I was there in a temporary capacity, and then was like working somewhere else, working elsewhere. And then when that job came up for like full time to be filled full time, the one that I had already worked, I applied for it and then got rejected for it. It was basically like, we've seen the quality of your work and we can do better.
We declined. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's bad. All right.
So a ghosting story. I interviewed to be like the assistant to the assistant. Like you couldn't be more of an assistant to this job. Like this is the lowest job at the Department of Cultural Affairs in New York City. Yeah. And at the time I was working at Pace University, which is the building is right across the street from the Department of Cultural Affairs. So I interviewed once with whoever, the office people, whatever. And then I interviewed with the deputy commissioner, and then I interviewed with the commissioner.
Wow, okay.
Of cultural affairs.
So this was a 3-round
exercise. Yeah, I went there twice, but I interviewed three people, and I never heard back.
Wow. You made it all the way up to the top of the pecking order.
And I saw them like often because we got off the same subway stop. We ate lunch in the same City Hall park. It was
that's intense. Oh my God. So you actually like ran into them physically. You ran to the people that interviewed you.
Yeah, but like, they didn't know who I mean, but I never heard.
Okay. That is worse. That's a worse ghosting story because that's like getting ghosted by like the guy that lives in your building.
I was like, come on, like,
I haven't heard that one. That's bad. Okay, let's see. I got I went to a staffing agency to try to get a full-time
that was a good one.
full-time job. This was to get a full-time job actually. This was a while ago. This is when I was trying to jump ship desperately from from our very bad shared job, and I went to a staffing agency and didn't really realize that they have their own agenda, which is to fill whatever jobs are on their docket.
Yep.
The person that I happened to go to was like doing administrative roles. And I got rejected from a number of things, including like being a receptionist at like a fancy architecture firm, which I really wanted to do actually because they had so many windows. It was so pretty. The office was in Soho and gorgeous. And like all the men who worked there were like rom-com lead actors, like the architect, you know how they're all architects?
Yeah.
It was like those dudes with like the button downs that are rolled up and like nice forearms. And I was like, I could totally do this job. And they were like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Anyway, so I eventually did end up getting a job at offer through that staffing agency for a job at a tooth whitening
startup.
Okay,
I remember you describing that. I mean,
yeah.
This was a sad situation.
It was a sad situation. It was basically very underpaid for a job that would entail a lot of work because it was a pretty small thing, and of course they always ask you to describe why you're passionate about the thing.
This is the problem. What do you say?
I'm like, I have like a negative interest in tooth whitening. I mean,
how do you have a passion in tooth whitening?
Nobody has a passion for tooth whitening. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know how to answer that question. I think now I'm much better at answering that question, which is like, I don't, but I can do a damn good job for you. So it doesn't matter whether how much I like have a passion for this product per se. But at the time I was like, people need to look their best. I don't know what I said. I don't know, pulled something out of my butt. But yeah, so that one was a non-starter for me. I ultimately found something better by myself because they really lowballed me on salary and then told me I couldn't do better. So I was like, booyah, bitch, I did better.
Yeah, I interviewed for a music festival, also had to do multiple interviews, met with the administration, then met with the artistic director. They made this whole stink about everything. This is a job that like anyone could do, like a high schooler could do.
Right.
I mean, it was a matter of like putting labels on envelopes. This is when I left my full-time job, so I was like, fine, I'll do something part-time.
Whatever you need to do to hustle.
So they kept asking me all these questions, bringing me in, and I was like, maybe this job on paper is different than what it is. Why they're being so thorough,
selective,
and
picky.
Then they actually did offer me it, and then they called. Like, we're so excited to offer you this. Congratulations. The pay is $10 an hour. I hope that'll be okay. And I was like, no.
Oh my
like,
God.
What?
Oh my God.
And why did you waste everyone's
Why did you
time?
go on multiple round interviews?
And why didn't you tell me it was a $10 an hour job?
Right. I'll just one more from me, which is neither here nor there, but another situation in which I got ghosted after like a pretty intense interview was a situation in which I was on this quest for the perfect black blazer in advance of this because I wear a lot of black blazers because you know, when we do like stage management stuff and like production work. So I finally found a blazer that I loved. I wore it to this pretty intense interview for a general manager job, and in which I was again interviewing with like the head of the board and stuff. So I was like, wow, I must be like, you know, I'm a contender, Charlie. So I like was taking a tour of this venue and took my perfect black blazer off. and somehow ended up leaving it somewhere in the theater. But then I got ghosted on the job, so then I never went back to claim it. So it's still there, probably.
It might be.
It's like I hope the box office lady who had initially been holding on to it was you know, is getting some good mileage out of it. I hope so. Sisterhood of the Traveling Blazer. So we are going to share with you a conversation that we had at the end of last year.
Yeah, a couple months ago.
That we've been sitting on for a while, but we're super excited.
It was this person, Vanessa
King.
Vanessa King.
She's a TV professional.
Yeah, that's
she's basically she's a fixer. She
writer, developer, all around good human being.
Yes. And she helps people develop their projects. That's her that's sort of her main bread and butter.
Her passion.
But she does all kinds of stuff in the entertainment business and TV. So we sat down with her to sort of pick her brain about her path and how she got to where she was, and it was such a delight. So we're super excited to share that with you.
So here it is.
Yeah, so we might have mentioned taking a TV writing class in the spring, and this is Vanessa King, who was our teacher, our expert.
I'm a little worried
spirit guide.
that you talked about me. I hope it was good.
Oh, we talked a lot about the class, actually.
Okay.
And
which was great.
Like the classmates or the class?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, just about mainly just about the class, and because for both of us, we had no experience writing anything television related.
I don't believe it.
That's very kind.
That's cool.
But it was mainly I think I think for both of us, that was just kind of this wanting to do a new creative thing that neither of us had ever done before, just to kind of try to take more risks of doing like a new creative pursuit without the baggage of kind of the other things that we've already done. But as much as it was our first time taking that class, it was your first time teaching that class,
was my
right?
first, I mean, that class specifically, I've been teaching for a really long time, but that was my first
in that format
class. And where you kind of walk in and have, they're really good because they kind of let you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do, as long as the certain facets of the course are hit over the 10 weeks. But I'd never planned a 3-hour 10-week, so 30 hours a week of screenwriting for writing specs, because I don't often write specs. I'm more of an original pilot writer. So I was when they first offered, I was like, yes, and then I was like, oh, specs, oh god, I guess I better have to watch some TV. So it was my first time teaching it. So it was. Thank you for being my guinea pig. I hope it was okay.
It was awesome.
It was great.
I'm teaching feature film writing. They've moved me into another facet of it. And I've realized how much harder writing for television is than writing for features. Just in the opposite when you're teaching it.
How so?
I think the thing is with television is that there is no structure. There's a generalized this is how you can schedule your acts, and this is what should happen at the end of this act, and this is what should happen here, and here are your character arcs and stuff like that. But there's no real guidance in the way that in feature film writing you're well, I have a limit. I have 120 pages to write, so that's the max, and hopefully less. So you just, even in planning out your story and making sure that you're hitting the beats, with television you have that, but you have to be able to sustain it over the course of hopefully 45 to 75 episodes minimum. So you're really writing War and Peace of screenplays, where one
word at a time,
long screenplay that's just I think that's what I found was the hardest part, was trying to be able to relay and teach people that maybe didn't have that experience to be you can do this. It seems a little overwhelming, but here, let me give you all the tools that you're going to need to do that. And I think there's just more tools that are required for TV writing. So,
well, and there's a lot more, even though it is more open-ended, you're not making a closed circuit world like you are in a feature, but it's more just you have to create a world that's self-sustaining for potentially indefinitely. But at the same time, each unit is so structured, which was great, because you can have so much creativity within the structure of I have 2 pages to say this, and then I have 2 pages to do this other thing, and by page 15 this has to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the micro macro between features and television, and I think that even though there is like a finite number of pages in feature, you just have to shrink everything down for television, and it makes it a lot more challenging to go like you said, I have 4 pages and I have to get from A to B because I'm at page 15 and, technically speaking, I should be having an act break here. So like, and you can always buck the system and not put the act break, but then you're going to send it off to someone who's going to go like, oh, your acts aren't structured right.
Right.
So,
well, and also like there's the sort of financial component, or not the financial component, but like the sort of, there's the constraints of the way it's being presented. Like there's going to have to be, if it's on network, there's like ad breaks.
So like you have to think about it. The hardest part about TV writing is thinking like a producer, because a lot of writers, it doesn't come naturally to them. They're like, I'm going to write the most expensive scene in the entire world because it looks good in my head, and you're like, that's going to cost like $2 million just for that one sentence.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not going to do that. Right. Amazon's got money, but not that much. So,
so it's TV writing. From the class and from what I got from it's like each line matters.
It's an economy of language.
It's an economy of language that I find like a real challenge, a fun challenge. And then now that I watched a movie last night, and it was like a well-reviewed movie, and there were so many lines. I was like, oh,
you start thinking critically, right? When you start watching stuff.
Which now I sort of blame you for ruining my TV and movie
Pulls back
experience.
The well, so I have 2 thoughts about that. First of all, that Andrew's now taking a different writing class, which is it's a fiction writing class. Okay. So it's totally divorced from the.
It's the opposite of economy of word. It's like vomit drafts.
No, but the great thing about it is that you were telling me about this. I don't mean to step on your story, but just that like having had that TV writing thing, you're like, well, I can say so much more with so much less.
That's true.
And I think that's really, people respond to
well,
that.
It's interesting. That class, the writers who are in that class are very experienced fiction writers, and they come at it from the language and the texture and the pacing and all these things. And they seem to be having more of a problem with story. And
you're like,
having that TV, having like the TV writing experience where it's like the story has to keep moving, and it has to keep moving in a certain amount of pages in a certain amount of time. It's just an interesting perspective. I would read their stuff and I was like, oh, the stakes aren't high enough here. Like this is great. Like the writer.
You're such a good student.
The writer will be like,
we crib your language all the time.
That's great.
And we're writing together a couple of new scripts, and
that's fun. Have you had a fight yet?
We have not.
No.
That'll happen.
Okay.
You'll get over it, but you'll both want to murder each other for about a day.
But we definitely are like, we're definitely like using your language when we're talking about editing things, and
that makes me.
The whiff of death.
The whiff of death. We use that one a lot. The whiff of death.
You gotta have it. You gotta have it.
Yeah.
So we should fill in. I want to fill in more about who you are, like what's going on a little bit. I mean.
Well, just because I actually don't really know a ton about your background. I mean, you've taught a lot. You've written you know how to write basically everything, like films, dramas, comedies, like all the things. Yeah, and you have a huge amount of experience, but I don't really know too much about your background.
So how did you tell us?
I actually was in pre-med. My parents were very sad when I told them.
Oh no!
I said, I don't know if this is gonna work out, and they were like, "You've wanted to be a doctor forever," and I was like. I mean, not forever. But, there was a film that was being shot on my campus. I'm from Canada originally, and there was this film that was being shot on the campus. It was a student film. They had a decent budget, and there was this mass email that went out to everybody that went to. I went to Wilfrid Laurier, which is like a university just outside of Toronto. And I was one of the few art students. It's a primarily business school, and so of course they sent it out to at the time I was like taking pre-med classes, but I was like on the arts track. I wasn't entirely sure where I was going, so I had like a heavy like biology, chemistry path.
Like, I'll just keep my finger in that.
Yeah, literally. I was like, well, sociology and psychology and communication studies all require these intro classes anyway, so I'm just gonna. So I was enrolled in arts and taking science classes and like not failing bio, but almost failing bio. And I was like such a perfect student from high school, so I was getting these like C's in university, and I literally was like, I don't know what to do with myself right now. So this email came around, and I was like, well, when I was in high school, so I come from this very small town. We had 1,200 people in the wintertime where I grew up, and then like 12,000 people in the summer because it's a tourist town.
Oh my god!
So is it on the water or something?
It's on the water. Okay. Yeah, it's like on the ocean. So it's called St. Andrews by the Sea.
Oh my gosh, that's so
very,
lovely.
It's very quaint. It sounds like
so quaint. It sounds like
some sort of
Green
show,
Gables.
TV show. Yeah,
we're only a couple hours from there.
Oh yeah,
so
that's like my dream vacation.
Oh great, come visit anytime. I'll get you a good rate at the hotel. So I was in a high school class, and I was there were only 3 of us in a media studies class. Like that was like my entire class had 3 people, and I had a couple classes in my senior year that were like myself, and that was it. So they basically said, like my teacher said, like, what do you want to do this year in media studies? And I was like, I don't know. I really like this TV show. Like maybe I might try and write a script for it. And I'd always kind of had an affinity for writing, you know, as you do in high school, where you're like just answering questions on a book that you've read. And so they were like, my teacher was like, great, do it, go ahead. Like, I don't know anything about it, so you're gonna have to teach yourself. And I was like, well, that's fine, I can figure that out. So I spent like the second half of my 12th grade year, sort of like a quarter of it at least, like teaching myself how to write a pilot. Or a spec script, really. It was for the show Mad About You, which I'm not sure if you guys know.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Totally. All right. Well,
It's a classic.
I love Mad About You. So that was my first spec I ever wrote. And I submitted it to my teacher, and he gave me like, not an A+, he like gave me an A. And I was really bitter, because I was like, you don't
know anything about it.
You literally just said you don't know how to do this. I think it's perfect. So at that point, I knew I was a TV writer. So I went to school, you know, I was still enrolled in this pre-med, switched over after my first year, and then that summer we got that email blast like, hey, there's a film shooting and we need people to crew up. So I didn't know anything about the practical side of production, because I came from a really small town and like had used like an editing bay from 1963 in my media studies class, where we're like I'm literally turning
knobs.
Yeah, turning knobs and like sliding like things up and down. So I mean, that was just how we were editing, how we were taught to edit, which I think nowadays I would be like a special person because I would know how to do that. So I wrote to the producer and I was like, hey, like I don't know anything about making a movie, but like I'm happy to help you out, like if you need like an errand person or whatever. So he was like, yeah, you know, come by my office and you know, we'll get you doing something. So I ended up being a producer's assistant for that first film. And then they had me do some publicity stuff too. And then the next year, so then that was like in the summer, in September, I was like, all right, now I'm switching like high communication studies and sociology. Like I didn't want to change schools, but I was like, how can I manipulate my studies to sort of get into this? Second year, they did another movie, same sort of situation. And then
and like you just liked the environment on the set,
I just liked the feeling of being involved in something where I was watching a story come to life. And to me, it was like, it's one thing to write it, but then I saw it, and you'd see the dailies, and you're like, wow, that was a terrible scene, but like, oh my God, it's real now. Like it was like one of those moments where you're just like, holy cow. And I don't know, maybe it's just my parents were good at teaching me things, but just like cooperation and knowing that like you have to rely on other people, and I'm really bad at relying on people. Like I like to do everything myself.
Yeah.
You understand?
I'm ready to just point at me.
Yeah, I mean, and it was at that moment I was like, I realized like I can't do everything by myself. So it was also really good, like just for my own psychological state to sort of put a pause on being a control freak and like controlling my domain, but knowing that I'm relying on other people. Yeah. So it was a good lesson in that for me, and I think I got something out of that. So I graduated, I moved back home, and as you do, and was working at the hotel in my town, like managing a fitness center. And one day the head of the hotel came down to me, and he was like, hey, he's like, so there's going to be this film coming to town. They're going to shoot at the hotel, and like, you're basically the only one in the entire town that's ever worked on a movie. And I was like, it was a student film, but okay. And so they said, well, we're going to give you like 8 weeks off to go work for the production, because they have to hire local. They had to hire local people.
Oh, was that like a stipulation?
It was like a stipulation of like the budgeting of the province was going to give them
tax,
you know, some kind of a tax break if they hired at least half or more of the people in the town. Which you have 1,100 people in your town, like pretty much everybody's working.
Right. So that itself, like the behind the scenes of that, seems like a Christopher Guest movie.
Oh, absolutely! It was. You had the locations person. I'll never forget. The locations person was like going into places. She's going, "I'm the locations person for a feature film." We're like, "We know who you are. Like you're the librarian."
I was literally the same.
You're like, Betty.
I'm like.
I just saw you at the gas station.
Literally, she just became this entire entire new person.
That's amazing.
I saw you buy that Slim Jim.
Oh, yeah,
You're not fooling me.
Exactly. We know you smoke hard. So I had this opportunity, and they put me in the office, like just kind of like as the production secretary, and then within a couple of days, like they realized the people they'd hired from the town that said they knew how to do things really didn't. And so I ended up getting a ton more experience and more work, just like practical set stuff. And I was like 20, not even 2 at the time. I think it was 21. And the actor who was working at that film was Billy Baldwin, who I love dearly to this very day. And he's like, what are you doing after this? And I was like, I have a job at a fitness center that I got. That thing doesn't run itself.
Very important.
It's a very important job.
That thing doesn't run itself.
So somebody's got to clean the hot tub. That's a whole other story. But so he was like, well, he's like, you know, would you be interested in coming to be my assistant? And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And he's like, it's just basically this, but for me. And I was like, okay. So yeah, that's kind of how I started, like just in the industry itself. And I worked in LA for a year and realized like I did want to be like a writer, and I liked writing, and I moved to New York shortly after, and tried to get into like grad school, but didn't try. Like I looked at the price tag, and that was my trying. I was like, nope, can't. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I do you remember the guys? I don't know how long you've been in the city, but do you remember the Barnes and Noble that was across from the Tower Records on the Upper West Side? It was on like Lincoln Center, Barnes and Noble. It's where Century 21 is now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go there every day after work because I worked at a bar when I first moved to the city, and I used to go there between like 10 o'clock in the morning until my shift at the bar. And I would take every screenwriting book and I would write it out by hand because I also couldn't afford. I couldn't afford to buy the book.
The hustle is real.
So I would have just pages. I wish I still had them. I mean, I literally wish I still had them. I'd probably save a lot of money on my library, but just pages of all of the screenwriting books, like handwritten out. And I would read them and like, you know, sort of take notes like it was like something I was doing for college that I couldn't afford to go to. So I think that helped a lot. I think just like in just the whole like reading, writing it out, and then reading it from the notes that I've done, and I typed it all up. So it was very a tactile learning experience for me. But over the course of a year, I think I read like 17 books. So and wrote them. I rewrote 17 books. So transcribed 17 books. So that's how I taught myself how to screenwrite. And then from there, it's just a matter of like reading scripts and doing whatever I could to learn more about how other people did it, because I think it's really important to though there is a craft to it, I think everybody kind of brings something of their own to it, and I think learning what works for some people but doesn't work for other people, and like trying to emulate it. I think it's really important for you to try and emulate other people's writing, just because you know, they might handle description a certain way and you're like, I'm going to try and do it this way. And they're like, oh, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't even sound like me.
Yeah.
But you've tried it, and now you have that in like your toolbox of how to do it. So that's kind of how I started. There was a group a billion years ago called the New York City Screenwriters Collective. But before it had a title, it was literally 12 people in the basement of this little restaurant called Swizz.
Swizz. That sounds gross.
It was a
sounds like they have nacho cheese there.
It was a Swiss fondue place. That's literally what it was. It's closed down now, but all they did, it was Swiss fondue. And they had this basement in the restaurant.
So weird.
So weird. Basement in the restaurant that was made of stone. Like I think it was also probably like a nuclear shelter.
Fallout shelter.
Yeah, exactly. And a bar that nobody ever staffed because there were only 9 of us, but they let us have the downstairs for free, which is gold in this city.
Oh yeah.
And we would sit there and we would pick apart each other's scripts. Like we would submit a script the week before, and the 9 of us would read it, and then we'd give you like pretty much criticized feedback on it. We didn't really get the like positive and negative. We just were like, so here's how I think it sucks.
Yeah.
But it was actually very helpful. And then, you know, there was always one person that was kind of moderating it. And so I was quickly bestowed a moderating job. So it's essentially like running a class. We went from like 9 people to, I think the person who was running it shut down the group when it hit like 3,500 because it was becoming, it was eating itself. Like it was a meetup group with 3,500 people on it. Nuts. So we separately, a group of us kind of started our own offshoot of it, which is something I run today. So it's the New York Screenwriters Co-op, NY.
And it does much the same thing?
we've taken our own spin on it. It's a similar take on it. The one thing I really wished I would have known was when you get into a room, when people have read your script and you get that chance and that opportunity to sort of like go in and sit down with an executive or an agent or a manager or whatever, it's what are the questions. I should have been prepared for the questions that I was going to get. So the way that we've turned it around, the model that I've chosen to sort of set it by was the first half of the class. It's a 2-hour class and it's free. We don't charge anything. We just ask you to buy again, we found a place that gives us it for free. So Stone Creek, everybody go there. It's the greatest place ever.
So buy a drink, buy some food or whatever.
We just invite people to buy a drink. And I think it's actually helpful anyway because everybody's a little more relaxed. Like screenwriters are notoriously like uptight and not very social. So
a bunch of like prickly introverts in a room together.
Literally, they're like, okay, now talk about not screenwriting. So we, the first half of the class is a similar situation where everybody's that's in the room, which usually are anywhere between 15 and 35, just depending on the weather and who's available. And it's all just sign up. We have right now after a year, we already have almost 600 people in the group. So it's like, it's a good crew of 30 people usually. And they read the script the week before, and then they have the first half is, I like to emulate that being in the room. So instead of just saying like, here are the things I liked about it and here are the things I didn't like about it, I actually ask the people that have read the script to pose questions to the author based on what they read. So the author then has a chance to reply immediately. So it's like, it's very much like being in a room where the executive would be like, why did you choose to have the character do that instead of that? Okay. And you have to think on your feet. And I think,
like, what's going to happen in episode 3?
How do you see this series playing out? Like things like that, or like, I didn't really like that character, but why did you choose to have them do this when they could have done that and they would have been likable? So I don't like to say that there's any wrong way to write, but you just need to be able to defend yourself as a writer. Like, what are the choices I've made, and how can I say this is the reason why I've done it? So that's sort of the class.
That seems tough.
It's a little scary. I have a couple of my students from this class of Gotham going to this other one, and she, the first person who went, she was like, I was terrified, and she's like, I sat between two people who have obviously been coming a while. It was like one of them's a professor at NYU, and the other one's like, so it's just like we have a really interesting crew of people, but and then the second half we just do instruction, like based on the problems that people have brought up, like how do we fix it? So the goal is just to get everybody to the next draft. So anyway,
and also just having like the conviction.
And being able to defend it, and if you don't know the question, that's okay. Just say, you know what, I have to work on that in the next draft. Like being able to admit that like maybe you've made a choice that seemed right at the time, but you've had like 5 people read it and 4 of them don't understand it. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess you're my audience, so something's got to stick somewhere else. So I think it's important for writers to sort of have to defend themselves and I think that actually takes away a lot of the fear when you're giving your work away for someone else to read. You're like, oh my God, I'm standing naked in front of a room. Like, what are they going to say? But if you feel sort of empowered to answer their questions or like call them back on it, like, okay, like maybe you had a bad day at work, so that's why you hate this character. So like, here's why I chose it. Does he remind you of your boss? Because maybe that's the thing. So anyway, that's kind of been my trajectory. I've sort of kind of gotten in, like, I like if it's not there, just start it. So that's sort of what I've done, and
that's definitely great advice.
Fallen into stuff. So I'm very fortunate, and I think someone told me once that like fortune is timing and talent. So I think I have a talent, and I think I'm just really lucky to have very good timing, and so then
I also think there's like nothing that's luck related about going out and copying down 17 books.
Right.
That's just elbow grease. That's like a lot. That's dedication.
There's hanging in there.
Something else.
There might be some sort of chemical balance.
I might have had to have been on something, but that's okay.
I feel like I have like so many more questions, like follow-up questions. Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna let you go.
No, first of all, I just really liked what you said about emulating like writers that you like, because I think sometimes the impulse is to be like, well, I have to do something completely new that like no one has ever written like this before or whatever. But then that sort of idea goes back to the whole like classical painter kind of method, where it's
I was thinking that too.
You have to like be able to reproduce the
Rembrandt,
the Rembrandt or whatever before you can then move on to like become Picasso or whatever. Anyway, not that I'm comparing anybody to Picasso.
It's a good analogy, though.
Like that was sort of how the school of thought then was, that you had to be able to reproduce everybody else's paintings before you could prove that, like, actually I have the skill to now have my own style.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing that applied to writing is really interesting. So I guess that's not a question, that's just a comment. But my question was that so you have sort of been primarily based in New York for the majority of your career, and like what
most of it
drove that choice?
I don't, I think my experience with LA was I was broke. I was broke and gas was expensive, and so it was like literally, I think it was like at the time I remember it being like almost $4 a gallon when I was living out there, and you only had enough because I wasn't paid I was 21 years old, so I was paid a decent salary, but I was paid like a 21-year-old should be paid, frankly. Right. And I would have enough gas to get through my week. And so it was one of those things where like I felt very stifled, and
it's like you can't go anywhere else.
I couldn't really. I didn't have a lot of fun. So I think I look at LA as a very like. I also didn't love the people. No offense, LA, but like there was a lot. You'd walk into a room and the first question was like, "Well, who do you do? What do you do? Who do you do too?" Honestly, but like, who are you? And like, what's your job? And how can you help me? Everything was almost like a, should I know you? And it wasn't like a, hey, you seem like a cool person I want to have coffee with. It was like, can I give my resume to you and then you can give it to your friend, and then but don't worry, I'll loop you in on it. So, that kind of that stuck with me, and it's not a fair look at LA. I go back now and I'm like, oh, this is a great place. Like I can go hiking every day if I want to, and like I land and it's like 72 degrees, and people are like, it's cold today. And I think that it is kind of an epicenter, and it's a lot harder to be a writer in New York just because it does require you keeping up, like finding somebody in LA and then keeping up that relationship, and doing that 2,800 miles away, 3,000 miles away, it's a challenge sometimes. So it does require more travel, and it does require like popping in for a weekend. Like that LA weekend trips are terrible, but sometimes you just gotta like fly out on a red eye and come back on a red eye. And it's a lot easier now that we have like video conferencing like Skype and all that sort of stuff, like whatever you want to use. There's a million of them now. And I think that that's helped a lot. And I also think that just a shift of not having to be in LA, there is actually like a lot of showrunners don't live in LA anymore. So I think that that's helpful. I think it's just kind of like a general tendency to like, oh, we don't need to pay you to be here. We can pay you and you can live in Ohio, and like,
right. We can pay you less.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's been helpful. I also like to look at it as, and I mean, I'm not like, the way that I'm in the industry in New York is different. Like I don't write on a show, and I've had the opportunity to write on a show, but I just chose not to, which some people shake their head at, but it's not what I really enjoy doing. Yeah. So I'm more of the like development side of New York, and I think in the city there's a lot of opportunity for writers as long as they're like willing and happy to do a development route. And my favorite thing to do is to read a script and fix it. So. It's way easier than writing. Let me tell you what's wrong with yours professionally, and you can pay me. So yeah, I think that like you have to make a choice. If you want to write in a room, I think just the number of rooms in LA, just proportionally, it's a lot easier to get a job. It's harder to do it here. It's like there's like, I don't know if there's a half a dozen. I think there might be 10 shows maybe that shoot in New York, and a lot of them are long running shows that aren't looking for rooms. So I think that that's a challenge. And so if that's what your goal is, it is harder to do in New York, but I prefer the like, let's get you to the room stage. Like, let's make sure that we can get it in a room. Let me get your script to that point. So like kind of like the kernel-y early development phase is what I like. So
polishing someone else's work.
It's like literally like catching the football at the 2-end line. Like that's what I like to do. I'm like, and touchdown. But yeah, that's sort of how I roll, is like taking someone else's work. And I just love stories so much, and I love someone else's story. As a kid, I always loved being read to, and I think that, I mean, I hated reading, but I loved being read to. So I think I've turned that into this thing where I'm an adult, where I'm like, well, you have to read because it's weird to have someone read to you when you're 38. But yeah, like feeling like a story and going like, oh, well, there's a hole here. Like, this doesn't connect with this. How can we make this happen? Or like, wow, this seems super offensive, but like, let's change that a little bit. So yeah.
I want to ask a little bit about your review process, if you don't mind. because there's the micro level of the from a scene to a scene, a scene itself working, and then there's the macro, the whole piece working. And I've been watching more television lately than I ever have before, and noticing the different sort of cadences that different shows have. And there are some shows that I think, my guess is that because producers and writers have had previous success, that there are companies that are, or production or networks that are willing to take a chance on them because their stories develop over a much longer period, multiple episodes, things like that. So I guess the question I'm asking, all of that said...
That was The Deuce that you're talking about,
yeah,
right?
That's an example. The Deuce is something that develops over many episodes, and it's great.
Which is exactly the opposite of what I teach, really. Like, I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the storylines are not
like
tied up.
Like the pilot, per se, doesn't give you that much about what the show is.
But I imagine that's because those producers and writers have already had previous success.
They've already sold their whole season. They don't care. They know they have 11 episodes to play it out. It's because they pre-sold the season. So
right. So when you're reading something, do you read something in its entirety first before you mark it up at all to get a sense of where it's trying to go, or are you really?
That's a really good question.
Scene by scene, and as issues pop up, you just.
I'm also a copy editor just by heart, by nature. So listen, I don't know if you get supported by Apple, but like the iPad Pro for screenwriters and for script editors is the most amazing thing in the whole wide world, because you can write, like you edit with the pencil on the script. So I can copyright, like what I end up doing is I go through and I edit all the copy while I'm reading. So if there's like a comma out of place, or like, my craziness with any kind of gerund, get rid of them all. So I do that first. And in doing that, I'm reading the page. It's very hard for me to do this over an entire script. I usually have to break a script up in two because it takes me a long time to actually read and give coverage of any kind on a script, just because I'm doing the hard line copywriting at the same time, copy editing. And so for me, I think I read in chunks. I sort of get to I tell myself when I'm going to sit down, okay, I'm currently behind on this poor person's 60-page drama that they asked me to read a million years ago. And I sat down the other day to actually do it, and I was like, okay, it's 64 pages. First of all, it's too long, but 64 pages. First comment, cut out 5 scenes. But I okay, you're gonna get to page 32. So I had to give myself that number, and I think what I end up doing as well, I've been thinking about those first 32 pages right now. After I've done all the edits on the page, I'm also writing questions as I'm going, why would she choose to do this? And then 3 pages later, I'm like, oh, never mind. Ignore question 5. So it's a very much I dive into a project, and I don't go scene by scene. I sort of go just overall story, but it does take me some time to break up the story and actually to do it. So I think that in that case, it's more of a holistic approach to it, where I just look at the whole story and then I think about it, and then I'll go back and go more into the detail of what's going on and stuff like that.
What are the things that you hate? Do you see things that happen over and over all the time that
God,
you just are
I hate the way people describe their characters. It's a thing for me. I think it's because there's a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, I don't like anybody telling me what to do. So if they're telling me that this person looks exactly like this way, I'm like, but that's not how you've written it. I have this weird vision in my head that this person has pretty much put into my brain, but then the person on the page that I'm seeing doesn't match. So I think and I also think descriptions are very based on physical aspects, which I think are not important in writing, because that's up to a casting director, that's up to the director, that's up to so many other people. Speaking of the cooperation part, you're the writer. You guys know, I always say, give me a physical characteristic that I can remember this character by, and give me an emotional characteristic that I can remember this character by, and that's all I really need. You don't need to have the age unless it's really important. 42. Okay, well, what if they're 38? What's the difference? Middle age. Okay, well, that's fine. Somewhere in her 30s. Usually I try and describe my characters as being late 30s. And then it's late 30s because A, it's who I'm writing from, but B, it's also that moment of just I'm setting a time frame for this person's trajectory in the story, like
Right.
all the things that are happening. But like to be like 42 giant boobs, I'm like, I mean, unless you're writing a porn, it's just
Right.
not...
I mean, unless there's a reason.
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
a giant boob gag
If
that will come
she uses
in.
them to protect other people, like, okay, fine, that's important. But like, if it's not a superpower, it's not important, you know. And why don't they like even describe the other side? They're like, she's you know. Her breasts are lopsided. Like, why does it always have to be the perfection? That's the thing. And when people describe their characters, they're always perfect. And that really bugs me because I think characters are just generally flawed. I think you want to try and write a flawed character.
Yeah, it's more
and
interesting.
if you've given me a perfect characteristic of somebody visually, like, you know, Adonis, and then Adonis is like, you know, that's where they find their irony, or at least they think they try to find their irony, is like this good-looking guy who's a bumbling idiot. And you're just like... A, I've seen it before, and B, like that's not compelling. So I think for me, the things I hate are character descriptions. I just think that they're really poorly used and poorly written, and you know, either they're underwritten or they're overwritten. Like there's like, I read a script the other day that had like 5 lines on this character, and I'm like, I don't need to know all of this. Like
let's just have them talk.
Yeah,
already.
exactly. Let me figure it out through what they do. So, yeah, I think I hate that. I can't really think of anything else that I really hate. I hate stereotypes. Like that drives me crazy. Break the stereotype. Doesn't matter what it is, but like break it. Like that's more interesting to me to have a character that's broken a stereotype than someone who just like lines up in what it is. You're just like, I've read this before, and it also didn't do well. So yeah. Be the change. I think that's really what it is for me. Those two things. I think descriptions and stereotypes, which is actually kind of description anyway. So, yeah, I think character. It's all character development. So, dialogue to me, like you can write flat dialogue, and some people are just good at dialogue, and some people are just bad at dialogue, and. I've been in the other side of the industry so long that I know that, you know, a lot of actors have script approval. So dialogue's important to sell your script, but like script approval is...
Yeah, what's that?
It's basically like if you're a certain caliber of actor and you've signed on to it, you can change the dialogue.
Oh, okay.
So if this dialogue doesn't work for you for whatever reason, like that's... I would never say that.
Yeah.
They can change it to suit them. Usually they'll do a take with the actual dialogue that's been written, but then the actor's allowed to do whatever they need to do, assuming that the director is okay with it.
Right.
So in that part, like the writer really falls so low on the totem pole at that point that like you just have to kind of know that your dialogue is probably going to change, you know. And I produce a lot on the side, and mostly just shorts and you know, whatever someone goes like, hey, I need help producing something. I'll be like, sure. And my favorite thing is to let the characters improv. Like, here's the script. Now you guys will do a whole take, so like make sure you're off book. But then like, okay, now on this take, like have fun with it. Like,
like you know where you need to end up.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're hitting that beat at the end of it, like have fun. So you get more natural stuff out of actors when you're allowing them to not, you know, say every word. So.
Right.
I think just as a writer, when you flip it around to do the producer side of it, like I can go like, my words are important to set the tone and to make sure that, you know, like if there is a joke and it's a funny one, like just try and say it. But but in the end, it's like, such a
I laughed a lot at this one.
Exactly.
Help me out.
It took me a long time to write that joke. So. But yeah, I think that's really important. But like back to the collaboration, being a writer, you're the most important person, and I can say that because I'm a writer, but you're the most important person because it's your story. But at the same time, once you've given it to somebody else, it's like you also have to be the best sharer. Because you're watching it change and having to adapt to what other people want to do to your story, and you just have to be either okay with it and allow it, or just produce it and then don't let them. But yeah, I think that's a real challenge. So I don't know, I went on a tangent. You asked me something, I think I answered it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I did.
What do you think is like some things that are happening or that you think are maybe like coming, like anything
going?
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's so many channels nowadays, so much opportunity to program. I think we're actually getting to this point of saturation with television where there's just a lot of crap on television right now. And I think it has something to do with like, oh, we have a 12 episode order, like quick, we have to get it out, you know. And I think that there's not as much of a focus on writing good stuff anymore. I think a lot of and I don't mean to bash anybody younger than me, but I think there's a lot of really young writers. And I know, like, if you were to subtract 12 years off of my life and then said, okay, now write a pilot, it wouldn't be the same caliber. And I think that that's a thing, because a lot of young writers are willing to work not being a part of the WGA, like not being unionized, so they can pay them whatever they want to write. To the the production company will be like, great, we'll give you $3,000 to write a pilot, which is great. They'll probably write an okay pilot, but they're 28 and like they just don't have the experience of developing story and like just even living life. I attribute lifespan to being able to be a good writer. So I think that that's why there's like this real kind of wash. I think another thing that I'm seeing a lot of is like film going into television, which is like the new hot thing, like to have all of the top actors and all of the top directors, like, and it's becoming to this point where people are just like, oh, I can't do this because I can't compete with like, David O. Russell, who gets $35
unlimited budget or whatever,
like, do an episode. Like, it's too much for people to like look at. So you go, okay, well, I can't ever write for HBO or Showtime. Which is fine, because you shouldn't aim to write for those ones anyway, because they're such a like limited opportunity place to write with. But it also, you go like, okay, well then I'm going to write for this, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, network is all full. So then you're like, well, what am I left with? So I think there's that problem, and I think the trend is I think what you're going to see is that fewer networks are going to have they're going to drop their scripted time, because I think reality TV sort of took over a whole bunch of really terrible years of television, and then there was a swing where we're like, oh, well, let's get back into scripted. But now the scripted is so watered down that I think you're gonna end up seeing that other shift back to something else. I don't know what it's gonna be. I think there's a lot of limited series. I think you're just gonna find a real I hope at least the UK model of television is I really love it, because if the show is over, the show is over. Like if it's a season
only
long,
going to be two seasons or 3
exactly,
seasons
and then it's done. And the North American system of television isn't like that, because it's all about advertising dollars, whereas the UK system is very subsidized. So like they don't have to worry as much, because they know the government's going to pay for their or at least a lot of their series. Whereas here it's kind of like a snake pit where you're like,
if there are eyeballs on it,
exactly, you have to win.
We'll produce shit if you'll watch it.
Absolutely, and people will watch it.
Well, and it's always the race to like getting to. I read this really interesting article about like the race to getting to like 100 episodes, because then once you tip over that line, then there's
get paid for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's like I think there's going to be. I think the shift is into more. I think it's beyond a limited series. It's longer than a limited series, but not so much like getting to that 100 episode mark, just because of the streaming networks and stuff like that. They don't care as much. Like, they don't care if they get to 100 episodes. They don't want you to go to 100 episodes because they want to put something else on in its place. So I think you might see in the next few years, like I know somebody who's actually developing a series right now that has, I think he said it has 17 episodes, which is essentially 2 seasons, and then it's over. It's just done. And the story is told, and your character has achieved its super objective. Have a good night. Like, it's the end. And I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of stories can be told in a limited amount of time. I don't think I think one of the hardest parts about writing for television right now is like coming up with a series engine that you can literally create, 100 episodes out of. Like, what is that one thing that's going to grease my wheels for 4 seasons or 5 seasons or whatever it is? So,
I feel like as a writer that seems very appealing, the idea that you can actually put an end bracket on, tell a story.
Like, this is it. This is what's going to happen. So I think that that's where the shift is sort of going. I'm seeing a few studios right now sort of like accepting, and again, not limited series, just shorter series is all they are. It's like, if the trajectory of the story is finished, then the story is over. And I like that, because I can also commit in my own personal TV viewing way, like I'm like, I can watch 11 episodes and then be done with it.
Totally agree with that, because I love TV. I love watching TV, but at the same time, there's a lot of of the really prestige shows that I haven't watched.
I haven't either.
Because I'm like, oh my God, I have to commit, like, okay, say I've never seen The Sopranos, for instance.
Yeah.
Mad
And I'm
Men.
like, and I want to watch it, like, theoretically, but it's like, every time I try to sit down, I'm like, well, once I sit down to this, it's like 7 years.
It's 7 years worth of
It's like, I have to, like, that's
I know.
a big
I think
commitment.
We talked about it in the class. Like, I've never seen The Wire. And, like, The Wire is
Haven't
supposed
either.
to be, like,
I
the
loved
it.
greatest
I
television
loved
show in
it.
the history of TV.
And I had the experience, though, of watching it, like, communally. So that really helped because it was like kind of like a, you know, like the book club kind of situation
Yeah.
where you're kind of watching it together and like wanting to know what's going to happen and that sort of thing. But like I do think it would be really daunting. I haven't seen Breaking Bad either, which is
I've
like,
seen parts of Breaking Bad, but again, I haven't seen the
like,
whole thing.
can't
Like, I
handle
was not into it. I started Walking Dead when it first, like, I got in on the first season, and now I'm one of those people that, like, I watch and I don't know why.
my roommate is that person too.
I'm like,
and
I
she's
don't
like,
know why.
She's like, I hate it. I
It's
love it. I can't
like,
not watch it.
Exactly.
It's just...
I will text my friend when I'm watching, like, this was the line of dialogue that somebody just got paid to write and say. Like, you're just like, what is going on? But, like, I also think that it was in the first couple seasons, it was an amazing show and, like, one of the better ones on television at the time. So it's like,
well, that
it's
one,
like
that one is one sort of that went
where-
beyond its expiry date a little bit.
I
so.
think that's one of the problems with television is that, I mean, it's not even a problem. Like, it's great for advertisers and everything like that, and it's what employs so many people. But when you do have that expectation of coming up with that many episodes, I think it's daunting to anybody. And I think that's also one of the reasons why a lot of shows don't sell, is because it might be a really amazing idea, but you have so many eyeballs looking at it for so many different things, and in the end, it's just going to come down to, like, how much money we're going to make on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And if they can see a show that's like, if in their head it looks like it has 13 episodes versus one that has like 37, they're like, we're gonna go with the bigger one, sorry.
Yeah.
So my hope is that we do push more to, like, just telling stories that need to be told.
Stories.
Yeah.
Well then, Vanessa, I want to thank you so much for taking your time
Thank you for inviting me.
a
This was
Saturday, your precious free time.
So fun. Yeah, I know your precious free time. It could be writing time.
No, I wouldn't be writing. I'd be doing laundry or something like that, so I wouldn't have to be writing.
And we could pick your brain for hours, but we will let you off the hook.
Anytime. This was really fun.
But thank you so much.